Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate, a show where we talk about the changing world around us and how we can make it better. Brought to you by Climate Change Realty. The only real estate brokerage that donates 50% of its net commissions to 501c3 nonprofit organizations dedicated to fighting climate change. So, Gwen, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Nice to meet you too, Ethan. Thank you so much for inviting me.
An absolute pleasure. And of course, we always love to get the podcast started with a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the moment.
Sure. So my name is Gwen, so it's not very easy to pronounce. So that's why I'm going with Gwen. I'm the new scientific director at the Sea Cleaners, which is a nonprofit who's fighting against plastic pollution in the marine systems.
Mm-hmm.
You want more?
I want more. Yeah. Well, what's the origin story?
So the origin of the story is that our founder, his name is Yvan Bourgnon, and he's a sailor, in those catamarans sailing for competition stuff. And when he was a kid, he went all over the world. I think it was for 4 years with his parents. So he was quite lucky with that. And he really got touched by the ocean, of course, and marine life and everything. And that's one part of the reasons why he became a sailor in the end. And later on, like a lot of years after, he did around the globe sailing competition as well, and on all by himself on a small catamaran. And he spent so much of his time stopped by plastic debris, marine debris, and he had to repair his boat so many times. And he was like, something needs to be done. And so he started to think about it, and he wanted to collect the marine debris and do something with it. And so then he created this association. It's called the Sea Cleaners. And in 2016, end of 2016, and since then it grew to over around 30 people. And we're all looking at what to be done with this plastic into the ocean, but not only, because since then the idea evolved quite a lot. And so it's not only collecting the plastics into the ocean, but also working with people on land and industries as well, so that we can look into kind of all of the supply chain and behavioral actions and things that people can do, so that we can one day hope to reduce that plastic flow into our oceans.
Yeah, no, we're definitely going to do it. And I appreciate what you're doing. And you're the scientific director, is that right?
I'm the scientific director, yeah. And I joined in May this year.
Very good. Well, glad to have you. Did you do like a PhD program or something in like ocean science?
So, yeah, a long time ago, you can see all of my gray hair. I started a PhD program, but so I studied first oceanography. But interestingly enough, I studied seaweed, and yes, and then I started a PhD. But so in France, the PhD is a 3-year process, and I did 2 out of 3, and I called it a day.
Fair enough.
And it was not for me, apparently. And so then what happened is that I went into scientific communication, that a master's degree that I did in Strasbourg. And then I had an opportunity to go to the United States. And so after 2.5 years, maybe working into scientific communication, I came to the US for 18 years.
Wow.
Since my English was not the best at first, scientific communication was not really what I could find as work. And so I did some logistics and things like that for a company called, well, no, a nonprofit called the Society for Conservation Biology. I was their annual meeting coordinator. So I was working with conservationists and practitioners all over the world to put conventions together so that they could talk about everything conservation. And that was really interesting. But unfortunately, as we all know, what happened in 2008, and you all know, and especially you, since you're a realtor,
Right.
the housing bubble kind of really hit the US pretty hard and hit the Society for Conservation Biology hard as well. So then what I did, I reinvented myself again. I started working for AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I worked into a topic called biosecurity. And that has to see with really looking at all of the laboratories around the world, especially for me, the Muslim majority countries. So I started working from Morocco all the way to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and putting meetings together so that we could talk about ethics and biosecurity and biosafety of everything, starting from the pathogens into the labs to the faculty, students, workers, everyone, so that we could do something about making sure that those pathogens wouldn't end up in the wrong hands. And then and then nature did that for us in 2020, as we all know.
So I've heard, yeah.
And so then after that, I left the US, unfortunately, because I was like, it's about time to go home. And I couldn't really stay in, all that jazz personally. And so I came back to France, and I was lucky enough to go back to my first love, which is the ocean, and work against plastic pollution.
You didn't want to hang out and join all the riots?
No, thank you.
Yeah, what I do want to ask you before we move into talking about the ocean and plastic pollution is, sounds like you've spent about half of your life in Europe and half your life in the US. I'm curious what your perspective is on the differences in culture between, specifically when it comes to respecting scientific literature in America versus back in Europe or around the world in general.
Well, I guess it depends who you're talking to, right?
Sure.
So some people really do respect science and everything science, and maybe sometimes it's becoming a religion as well. And other times it's like anything science and you're the devil. And I was in Washington, D.C., so it's very wonky over there, right?
Sure.
So it's a different culture as well. So for me, as a scientist, of course, science is very important and inform everything we should do and how and why. In France, we have our issues too with the pandemic. A lot of people don't want to get vaccinated either. And so, the world is changing. And I think that's become because of all of the misinformation that is coming from everywhere. And so people are maybe starting to be too much introverts and introspective and don't want anything with the outside world, which is really a problem for collaboration, cooperation, and really tackling everything that we need to tackle to be better with the round around us.
We're gonna fix it, Gwen. We're gonna get some collaboration going. There are some really amazing programs and people that are working on fixing this issue. It's all about tackling large corporate institutions that don't necessarily have their ideals aligned with the good of humanity, which is why I really try and promote nonprofit organizations or for-profit organizations or individuals who are promoting ideals about creating a system that is at the forefront of benefiting not just humanity, but just all life in general. You know, I'm all about the whole regeneration thing. So what I wanted to talk about to begin this conversation is can we recycle plastic? Because I think a lot of people think that you just toss your plastic into the recycling bin and then it gets remade into another piece of plastic. But what I understand is that's not the case. And something very interesting that I found out just last week, and I'm deeply involved in all this stuff. And just last week, you know, the recycling symbol in the US is those 3 arrows. And the plastic industry created this symbol with thinner arrows with numbers in the middle. So I've always thought that these symbols on the plastic bottles were the recycling symbol, but they're not. It's like a sorting symbol. So there's like you said, like I don't want to call that misinformation, but it's definitely deceptive advertising. So can you speak a bit to how much we can reuse plastic?
Yeah, so that's very true what you just said. And actually, for the people who listen to NPR, I was just listening to that again this morning for this podcast to refresh my mind. I think it's Planet Money. They did something really good in 2020, September 11th, actually. And for everyone who wants to listen to that, that's great. So yeah, the problem is that exactly from the very beginning of when plastic was invented and until now, only 10% was recycled. And so now the recycling bin, I'm calling that the magic bin. Because, you know, people, yeah, that's what, you know, and that's what everybody told people, is that you just recycle and don't worry, we'll take care of it. And those symbols, as you said, is just to sort, but sorting is actually a very big issue because a lot of plastic has been there's been some integration with additives and other materials. And also, as we all know, if food has touched the plastic often, we cannot recycle it. So why is that? It's because of all of the problem with infrastructure behind. So the only thing that is really easily recycled is a bottle of water, for example. So it's the PET. And so why is a bottle of water easy to recycle? It's because actually the industries thought about it very well, and everything is regulated from the get-go for how to recycle in the end. That's PET. And why? Because that virgin plastic has value and can be recycled because it has been thought about. So not only the additives, they know what additives is going in. The label around the bottle needs to be a certain kind. The glue needs to be a certain kind. Everything, so that then in the supply chain, in the recycling chain, everything is easily done. They don't lose money because everything is about money in the end, of course. And so that's the issue. Why isn't it thought about for every plastic that we use? Because it's cheap. So then, you know, you just produce plastic and then they tell you we can recycle it, but a lot of it is burned or put into landfill. So it's really a waste of energy in the end, which is really shameful because we do need energy in our life because we consume so much. And so if we could think about and really regulate how plastic is made, for what, and really basically go back to what plastic was intended for, when it was created. It was a noble material. It was to replace ivory, the very first plastic. because they didn't want to use it from elephants or else. And so why not try to really look into it so that it could be recycled in the end, and do work on the infrastructure as well. But not everybody can afford that either.
Sure. Ivory, like for pianos? Like what else was that used for?
Yeah, actually it was for the billiards, the balls, you
Oh,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so there was a push at some point. They wanted to have something else because they thought that we shouldn't use ivory anymore. And so it was bakelite, I think they called it. And so that's how plastic was, that as an industrial material, that's how it was created.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, there's no doubt it's an essential part of the way we live our lives now, but there are certain things that can change. Like, for example, I've got the headphones in my ears right now that are made out of plastic. But that figure that only 10% has been recycled is very startling. And I find it interesting that you say water bottles are one of the best things to be recycled, because that's like one of the main things that people replace. So it's like they're still using all of the bad stuff. Can you speak to some of the major health issues and risks associated with producing all this plastic and releasing it, either burning it or putting it into, I mean, where is it going?
So the problem with plastic and health, it's again, what are we talking about? Whose health, right? And so if we talk about the ecosystems, and so what is a healthy ecosystem? It's something that works really well. And so we all know right now that our oceans are suffering, and which is really, really bad, because our ocean is really essential for us to have a good, earth balance, because it regulates so many things. And so we dump our plastic into the ocean, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. For example, earlier this year there was a strike in Marseille, a city south of France, and a strike for waste management. And so it happens, right? New York knows it very well as well. And but what happened is that a very, very big storm, I think it's like in a few hours they had 2 months of rain or something like that. I don't really remember the number, but so all of that running water came rushing down the water basin and pushed all of that trash into the ocean. It was disgusting. And so so this is what happens. A lot of plastic ends up into the ocean, and we also saw those images of the turtles entangled in plastic, or all of those birds, the albatrosses, with all of the plastic in their stomachs, just dead on the beach, or whales again, also entangled with ghost nests that have been dumped or lost by fishermen. And so those are really something, those issues are in your face and you see it, and contributes to a non-healthy environment, because the wildlife is suffering and dying. There's also the plastic itself, when with the waves, the UVs, and a lot of other mechanisms start to break, and then that can also how do you say that, can wound the fishermen, right, on the
Oh,
boats,
really?
because yeah, it in the when they gather everything that they caught, they can cut themselves with a sharp litter and what else for maritime workers. So that's something that affects us, but it continues to affect the ecosystems, because so I told you about the bigger pieces, right, for the bigger wildlife, but the more plastic degrades and turn into smaller pieces, then microplastics, and then even nanoplastic, then it gets integrated, ingested into the other wildlife like zooplankton and as well as phytoplankton. And so that's destroying the ecosystem as well, because they die because of that, potentially not really because of the plastic itself, because often it just pass through their digestive system for the zooplankton. But it has been shown that plastic is really good at attracting toxins and pathogens.
Great.
Like bacteria and viruses. And so then the more you ingest those, the more you have pathogens and viruses and toxin that accumulates into your organism. And then it hasn't really been shown that it goes up the chain, but a lot of studies need to still happen, because it's kind of a new science. And so that's why we cannot have really conclusive. I cannot tell you, yes, plastic is killing us.
Right.
We don't really know. We know that it's there. Not only it's in our environment because it's in our marine ecosystem, but it's also in our water bottles because it's in our water. Mm-hmm. So it's in fresh water as well. And we inhale it as well, because the microplastic it's all around us, not in very high concentration, but we do inhale plastic. Microplastic has been found at the top of Mount Everest, to everywhere. The very bottom of the Mariana. So it's everywhere. The biological impacts are here, but mostly because of physical damage and entanglement and sharp cuts and things like that. But another thing that we don't think about often is it also, for some of us, it affects our mental health, because we see trash everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
And we see that, we see those images as well. And so, and our beaches, some people clean their beaches all the time, and then, it's back the next day. And for me, I'm lucky. I live in Brittany right now. So, I find some pieces of plastic here and there. It's fairly pristine, because there is that collection of waste that is really good in France. So there we have a good infrastructure, but not all of the countries can say that. And so it's everywhere. Of course, those people also often, they have other things to think about than looking at trash around them, because they need to, what they're really looking into and what they face every day is, what am I going to eat the next day?
Sure.
But it's there, right? It's right. And so it's something that it's really a problem that is, we have to face it everywhere, in what we ingest, what we breathe, what we see, what we hear. And so it's we have to face it, and we need to do something about it. But sometimes it's so overwhelming that we just hide ourselves, and we can't really, all alone, it's something that we cannot do.
Right. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up that mental health point, because I had never thought of that when I was traveling around Europe after I graduated from college. I remember seeing like trash on the ground and thinking it just makes you like depressed. So I had never even considered that. Also, we've said on this show before that, we ingest around, with all, whether it's in the air, in the water, anything, we ingest around 3 grams a year is estimated in plastic, which is about the size of a credit card. So that's very interesting. Let's talk about how you guys are trying to fix the problem over at the Sea Cleaners. What is like the main project that you're working on at the moment?
So the main project is really collecting plastic waste, right? And that will be done mainly with the Manta. And so the Manta is our flagship, and it's a big catamaran that is going to be built in 2024.
A
We
big
are
what?
in what?
Catamaran? Catamaran? A big what?
Catamaran. It's we don't say that
Is that like a
we
sailboat?
it's a sailboat, yes.
Okay.
You don't say catamaran?
I'm
No.
not a big sailor. I used to do sailing at summer camp on the lake, and I always got like everyone else knew how to do it and I didn't know how to do it.
Okay. I
Yeah.
won't take that against you.
No worries.
So I don't sail either. I kayak. So
Easy.
we collect plastic. Yes. We collect plastic waste with that big boat, right? So it's a sailboat. We call it the Manta because it's bio-inspired, and so we say that the boat eats the plastic, right? So it's get collected in between those two floaters and get up the boat, and then it's sorted there, and then according to what plastic is, we put it back into pellets or not, and then we bring it back into the onto land, or potentially with our waste to energy converting unit on board, we do convert some energy in there. So but that's the big boat. And then on that big boat, there are also two little boats that we call the mobulas. And basically, it's meant for a continuum from the river mouth and rivers or canals, mangroves, ports, and to the Manta, which will be in still coastlines, but a little bit, of course, further out, not in how do you say that, in shallow water. So we have those two boats that are meant to be able to go up the rivers and in between the lands there to the Manta, so that we can actually really rehabilitate an entire ecosystem there. And so that's there for collecting plastic waste, those three boats. But not only, because we also will use the Manta and actions on land to educate and raise awareness to the public on what is the problem and how can we reduce the issue of waste into the ocean. And then also there are going to be some scientific missions, and all of that data that are going to be collected while we collect the plastic waste is going to be shared to the community as open data. And finally, we want to, by working on land with the stakeholders that are into that supply chain of plastic one way or the other, we want to integrate the local circular economy, but not, well, with bringing solutions, but, of course, it's by integrating it and not coming, as colonizers, and
Sure.
but really talking with locals to understand what the problem is. How can we, with our vessels, the two mobulas and the Manta, how we will be able to support what they want to do, if they have a plan, or work with them with a plan if they want to, and of course also work with the scientific community on the ground to collect and samples and then study the plastic on site.
That's amazing. Where is there like a particular geographical area where you guys are thinking of implementing the project?
Yeah, so far our goal is to go to Indonesia next year with the first boat that we built, the Mobula 8. So yes, I didn't talk about there are the two boats. One is called the Mobula 8 because it's kind of 8 meters long, and the other one is called Mobula 10 because it's kind of 10 meters long. And
Right.
the Mobula 8 is built and done, and we are looking right now at shipping containers because it can be put onto a shipping container into a container to be shipped to Indonesia. Why Indonesia? Because unfortunately, it's one of the countries where the pollution is one of the major issues over there is plastic
I've seen it.
pollution.
I've been there. I've seen
Yeah,
it.
right. And so it affects so many things for them. It was a pristine destination, Bali. Everybody knows Bali. Unfortunately, there's so much plastic every day dumped into the ocean or on the streets everywhere. It's so bad that the Indonesian government has decided to their goal is by 2025 to reduce waste, any type of waste, by 75%. So that's a very ambitious goal, but the goal is there. And when we launched our boat, also the Mobula 8 in Paris last June, we invited, of course, the many embassies, and a few countries came to see us, saying that they were interested in working with with us, collaborating, so that we can help them with rehabilitation of some ecosystems, because of course those countries are really big as well, so we cannot do everything. And so Indonesia first, and we chose Bali after talking actually with a lot of stakeholders on the ground. And at first we thought so many people are already involved, and Bali must have been taken care of. But no, because the problem is so huge that even if there are actions already, more is needed. And so we are going to Bali with the Mobula 8, and we hope that it's going to be shipped fairly soon. As you know, there's a lot of issues with
Travel.
the travel, but also containers are in high demand, and the supply is getting low. And so after the pandemic, everything is much more difficult to do. So there's some we wanted to ship it by hopefully before the end of this year. Potentially it's going to still happen, but it's getting less and less so early 2022, hopefully.
Sounds great to me. Thank you for doing that. That sounds great. I've actually been to Bali, and I've seen the amount of plastic pollution over there just on that one island in Indonesia. So that's very interesting to know. Yeah, I want to speak a little bit about the effective strategies to just fixing the plastic pollution in general, because it would seem to me that we're conducting these outrageous experiments, whether it be emitting billions of tons of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere to see what happens, or emitting billions of micro particles of plastic into our biosphere to see what happens. It's like we don't know for sure if it's going to have negative consequences, but I don't think there's even a reason to try and find out. But I mean, yet here we are. And it's interesting how there's kind of two sides to the climate. And there's not two sides. It's not that simple, but we're emitting CO2, and then we need to draw down CO2 out of the atmosphere. And we are creating plastic, and then we're putting it into the biosphere, into the environment. So I wanted to ask if you had any ideas on how we can kind of fix the production side? Like, what can we do? Is it just consumers need to use less plastic? Like, is there any, or can we stop it from entering the ocean somehow instead of just collecting it once it's in there?
Yeah, everything needs to be done, everything. So of course everybody is talking about what we call ourselves even now consumers, what the consumers need to do. And yeah, reduction of plastic would be great, but I don't know if you tried without preparing yourself to do the free plastic July.
I'd be down. I'm working on going zero waste.
Yeah. So one year I was like, oh yeah, free plastic July, great. And so I didn't prepare at all. And I was like, maybe the second day I was like, no way I can do that, because everything you touch almost is plastic. You go to the grocery store, if you're not prepared and if you keep your life as usual, you cannot do it. It's I think it's impossible. So really you need to really think about what you do every day, where you go to get your groceries, and everything that you buy, you need to assess. So that's how I would do it.
I
And
agree.
you need an audit at first to see where the issues are on your own life, and then change that by knowing what the alternative is, right? And that's, for me, that's what everybody, all of the stakeholders in that supply chain need to do. So why not look at a product and see, okay, we build it that way, but is there a way to, like the plastic bottle, to really look into how we manufacture it so that in the end we can truly recycle it by collecting it? So like maybe there's a fee in the end that, if you bring whatever you consumed and is done, you bring it back, then you get something back, so that I don't know. But so there's that. And then of course, and most importantly, I think that the scientific community is working on identification, characterization, and really other alternatives to that plastic. What can we do about it, so that then we can bring that information to policymakers, and those policymakers need then to regulate the market on how to do things, especially if that is linked to what we consume, and that means climate change and greenhouse gases and everything. Because plastic, as most of us know, most of it comes from oil, and it's so cheap to produce that, why not? And people don't even think about what they touch every day. Is a lot of the things we do in our life, and what we touch is plastics. Like, for example, clothing. A lot of what we wear is there are plastic fibers, and that those plastic fibers have actually been recycled from some plastics into fibers, because it's one of the things we can do. But then we all know that then when we wash that piece of clothes, it emits microplastic. So it's a never-ending issue, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, for example, and especially after I came back to France, right, I only had maybe 10% of a container, not even with my stuff, right? Mostly was clothes, books. I brought back a table because it looked cool, and other things, but I have nothing, right? So I needed everything to put in my apartment. So what do? I buy everything secondhand. Sometimes it's more expensive, but it's durable, and then I try to have like that kind of look in my apartment, right? So and I do everything the same way for what I wear. I try to buy everything secondhand. I find it beautiful, to be honest with you, because it's something that you can love again, and that's great. But not everybody can do that either. You don't have the money potentially, because that can be also expensive depending on what you wear and want to wear. But because fashion is so cheap, it's made very fast.
It's the worst.
It's the worst.
It's a huge
now,
polluter.
yes, and so now you see those massive patches of plastic everywhere in the world. But now everybody saw that too, is those images of clothing everywhere, because we produce so much. Some people, they wear something once or twice, and then the season change, it's not the same color, and so they follow the fashion industry, and they don't wear it anymore. Why? This maybe is like 20 years old. Why not? I don't care, right? And it's still great. So it's looking into what we do every day, how can we change our life. But it's not only that, it's also potentially by your vote get regulation changed because you want a certain issue looked at, calling your representatives and things. And also, of course, there's all of these big treaties and else that the United Nations is putting together, and we just had the COP26 not too long ago. So there's a lot of work to be done, and hopefully we can all work together so that we can do something against it.
What are your thoughts on COP26? I know that you were there.
Yeah, I was there, and I've never been to a conference that was so overwhelming. I wasn't very prepared for it, actually, and because it was really hard to know where to go, because there was so much going on all at once, and everything was so interesting. I didn't have the cool badge that could lead me into the negotiation table and listen to that. That could have been cool too, but so I was in the zone for the public, and so that was really great to be there. But at the same time, it was sad, because there was so much hope with the COP26, and I think it didn't produce in the end. But I think that having people to understand that, first of all, it actually accomplished something, that it was in the forefront of everything for so long, and so people talked about it, right? And people talked about what the goal was, to keep temperature rise under 1.5, and we're not there.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And with the IPCC report as well, we all, well, those who are informed or
I read some
listened.
of it. Yeah, the IPCC report's pretty startling.
yeah, and for once they use strong language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can see that not much is happening still. And so what so mitigation is not enough anymore, and so we need to think about adaptation. And so, because let's face it, it's already there. We saw, like, in the last 2 years with all of the fires and the flooding, it's there. And so what can we do about it, and what can we do in our daily life to try to adapt to it? That's a big question, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know when it's going to be at your doorstep tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So who knew that we would see those images with the metro in New York this year? That was pretty crazy. So the COP26, I think, helped to show people that maybe the leaders, some of them, those countries that are the most burdened with it, are mostly doing a lot, and those who have a lot to burn and to to do with the pollution that is around us, continue to pollute. And so why? Because of the lobbyists, right? And because of interests of those big companies, that they don't want to lose their income and their money, right? And so, but it's so short-sighted. And so what can we do as individual is what I just said, right? It's try to potentially live more with more humility, do a little less. Why is that bad? I think that with the pandemic, a lot of us questions our own lives, right? I came back to France, for example, to be closer to my family, because I saw that what I was doing was not sustainable, because I was all by myself in the US, and at some point that was not my goal in the end. And so what can we do so that we live more with more humility, maybe more peace? Because I think that, as I said, the pandemic showed us that while going full speed all the time is great, we actually also rested a little bit, and we thought about, wait a minute, why am I doing all of that? And family became a little bit more important for those who actually have the joy of having a family that is around, or how do you say that, supporting them, so there's that. And then of course there's looking into what can be done with all of the international treaties, as I said, to be able to get the ball rolling, so that we can fight that plastic pollution and really cumbersome waste that is all around us. So what can we do for that? Is maybe think about what Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So join a group around you, see what can be done, be generous with your neighbor, look around. It's not much, but I think that the more we we become a community, the better it is to be able to actually turn things around, because the more we are united together at the base, maybe we will have a little bit more power against those in power, because maybe we don't have the money, but we're numerous.
Absolutely. No, but I disagree with you. It is much. Every single decision that you make every single day makes a huge difference. And what I want to respond to what you said about COP26 and how there's this idea of these global leaders get together and have this big meeting and debate. And you spoke about how you didn't get the cool badge to go in and be with the cool leaders, but I think you're the cool leader. And I like talking to people like you. And that's why I have this podcast. And there's this idea of I need to get these prolific guests to grow my audience and people who know lots of people are these big leaders. But I really like talking to people who are dedicating their lives to doing work that helps other people. And that's what I love about this show. And that's what I love about what you're doing. So I'm not impressed by Joe Biden or or whatever the president of other countries are doing. First off, their job is impossible. Someone's going to hate them no matter what. Of course, we call them public servants, we call them leaders, but I'm personally impressed by someone like you who gets involved with a project that they're passionate about, and specifically because you want to create a net positive good for the world. Not saying that our leaders don't do that, but a lot of them are certainly motivated more by paychecks or re-election than anything else. And I truly believe that anyone listening to this podcast can find their passion and get involved in a project that will make a difference, whether it's building cohesion on the ground or building a technological system that will change the world. There are some presidents that are very charismatic that we remember in this country, but some of the best leaders from around the world, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, these guys weren't elected officials. They were people on the ground. They would have conversations with people. They would make speeches and inspire people, not to try and get votes, but to try and make change in the world. So I'm not like, I don't want to like put down political leaders too much, but people know, if you listen to this show, that I'm much more interested in the private sector. And that's because anyone can get involved, and you just need to get the work going and create the system. And if everyone around you likes it, I don't know. That's my response. So I appreciate you. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. And actually, I wanted to say something about that. The scientists are doing their studies and everything, but they rely more and more also on citizen science. It's something that is really important, especially then when those issues that we're confronted with are so huge and they affect all coastlines everywhere. Everything, the data that is collected every year for cleanups and things, those are actually used by scientists in the end, and they can characterize, identify, really understand the problem way more than what they would be able to do all by themselves, because the scientific community is rather small for plastic pollution still, right? And so we know citizen scientists with the birders are looking at every year they count the birds. Well, now that every year we count plastic as well, right? And so this is amazing because we can know where the plastic is, where it's coming from, the audit of brands, and so that can really help locally to be able to understand what kind of infrastructure is needed to combat that flow down the drain, but also nationally, then regionally, and finally internationally, by all working together.
Right. Very interesting. Yeah, no, I just really want to drive the point home. I really think like people get really lost in this mess of information and of all these challenges and can kind of, like you said, just kind of back down. But I really feel like if you're in that stage of life where you're looking for a job and you want to have a great career, there's so many opportunities to do good in the world, whether it's in the for-profit or nonprofit space. And I think people can just, if you want purpose in your life, find a mission and join on. Like reach out to the sea cleaners or anyone else. There's so many amazing projects going on, and you can make a huge impact just through your own personal actions. So Gwen, thank you so much for joining me today. I just want to ask at the end if you have any advice for young people who are passionate about science, kind of just entering the workforce.
Yeah, keep doing it. Keep, the world needs you, and there are so many great great actions put together by young people. Like we work with an organization called Bye Bye Plastic Bags in Indonesia, and there are so many more all around the world on everything from human rights to women issues to plastic pollution to immigration, and saving them, in the Mediterranean, for example. So really believe in the work you do, and even though sometimes there's conflict, there's always conflict between human beings and organizations and stuff. Like, just look at the mission, and but also don't forget to take care of yourself, because even me, sometimes I don't do it. So it's really hard sometimes because it's so overwhelming, but keep the world going. Keep looking at what you want to accomplish and the good you bring to the world, and your smile.
I love it. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me again. Thank you, really. Yeah.
No worries. All right, everybody. See you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Changing the Climate. Here at Climate Change Realty, we don't just donate 50% of our net commissions to fight climate change, we also donate a full 50% of our real estate referrals. So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrboulder.com today.